Captain Lee Jun stood on the bridge of the Soul's Pride, watching the massive council station grow larger on the view screen. The structure was enormous, bigger than Earth's moon, and it had been here at the center of the galaxy for millions of years. Ancient metal and crystal formed impossible shapes that hurt to look at for too long. "Captain, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Council," said Lieutenant Park Hana from the communications station. Her voice carried a note of confusion. "They're requesting immediate docking for an urgent meeting." Lee Jun frowned. This wasn't supposed to be a diplomatic visit. The Soul's Pride was just passing through Council space on a routine patrol. Humanity had been part of the Galactic Council for 37 years now, but they were still considered newcomers. Post-Council business happened without human input. "Did they say what this is about?" he asked. Park Hana shook her head. "No, sir. Just that it's urgent and relates to humanity's status in the Council." Lee Jun felt a cold weight in his stomach. In his experience, when ancient alien civilizations wanted to discuss your status, it was never good news. But refusing a council summons wasn't an option for anyone who wanted to keep breathing. "Take us in," he ordered, "and send word to Earth Command. Let them know we've been called to an emergency council meeting." The docking process took 2 hours. The council station was so massive that finding the right docking bay was like finding a specific grain of sand on a beach. Ancient automated systems guided the Soul's Pride through corridors wide enough to fly battleships through, past structures that had been old when humans were still learning to make fire. When they finally docked, a council escort was waiting. The alien was tall and thin, with too many joints in its arms and legs. Its face was hidden behind a breathing mask, but its eyes were large and dark. It spoke through a translator that made its voice sound like grinding metal. "Captain Lee Jun of the human species. You will follow." The council waits. Lee Jun brought Park Hana with him. She was his best officer and the ship's expert on alien cultures. If anyone could help him navigate whatever was coming, it would be her. They followed the escort through corridors that seemed to stretch on forever, past rooms filled with beings from across the galaxy. The council chamber was a vast sphere, with the speaking platform at the center and observation galleries spiraling up into the darkness above. 12 massive thrones dominated the chamber, each one designed for a different species. Ancient beings sat in those thrones, creatures that had ruled the galaxy since before Earth's sun was born. At the center throne sat Council Prime Vexithari. The being was made of living crystal that shifted between different colors as it moved. Its voice, when it spoke, came from everywhere at once. "Human Representative Lee Jun, you stand before the Galactic Council to receive an important communication regarding your species." Lee Jun stepped forward. The chamber was so large that his footsteps echoed for several seconds. "I'm honored to appear before the Council, Prime Vexithari." "The honor is unnecessary," Vexithari said. The crystal being's form shifted to a deep blue color. "You are here to receive a formal tribute demand, as mandated by galactic law for all junior species." The words hit Lee Jun like a physical blow. He'd heard of tribute demands, but only in historical texts about ancient conquered civilizations. "I'm not sure I understand, Prime Vexithari," another council member spoke up. This one looked like a giant serpent covered in black scales. Its voice was smooth and cold. "I am Ambassador Quintal, tribute enforcer for the council. Perhaps the human requires clarification of basic galactic law." Ambassador Quintal's throne moved forward, bringing the massive serpent closer to the speaking platform. When a species joins the Galactic Council, they enter a period of evaluation. This period has concluded for humanity. You are now required to provide tribute as acknowledgement of your junior status and in exchange for council protection. Lee Jun felt Park Hana step closer behind him. He could hear her breathing faster. "What kind of tribute?" he asked. Quintal's eyes, which were the size of dinner plates, fixed on Lee Jun. 40% of your species' annual production. This includes food, manufactured goods, raw materials, technology, and 10 million human workers to serve council needs. The number was so large that Lee Jun's mind couldn't process it at first. 40% of everything humanity produced. 10 million people sent to work for alien masters. It would cripple Earth's economy within a decade. "That's impossible," he said. "Humanity couldn't survive giving up that much." "Survival is not guaranteed," Quintal replied. "Tribute is mandatory. The method of providing tribute is your choice." Council Prime Vexithari's crystalline form shifted to a brighter blue. The Council has protected and guided junior species for 50 million years. This system has brought peace and order to the galaxy. Your species will adapt as all others have. Li Jun looked around the chamber. In the observation galleries, he could see representatives from dozens of species. None of them looked happy. Many looked exhausted, defeated. These were the tribute-paying species, the ones who had already been broken by the system. How long do we have to consider this? Li Jun asked. Consider? Quintal's massive head tilted. There is nothing to consider. Tribute demands are not requests. They are statements of galactic law. Even so, Li Jun said carefully, I need to consult with my government before I can respond officially. The council members made sounds that might have been laughter. Fexthari's crystal form flickered through several colors before settling on yellow. The human demonstrates amusing ignorance of his position. Very well. You have 24 hours to consult with your primitive leadership. Return here tomorrow with your species' formal acceptance. And if we refuse? Li Jun asked. The chamber fell silent. Even the quiet humming of the station's system seemed to stop. Quintal's black scales rippled in what might have been amusement. No species has ever refused a tribute demand, the serpent said. The concept is meaningless. You will return tomorrow with your acceptance, human. The alternative is unthinkable. The escort appeared again, ready to lead them back to their ship. As they walked through the endless corridors, Park Hana stayed close to Li Jun. Captain, she whispered, I've been recording everything. Earth Command needs to see this immediately. Li Jun nodded. His mind was spinning with the magnitude of what had just happened. Humanity had just been told to hand over nearly half of everything they had, plus 10 million people, or face the consequences. Back on the Soul's Pride, Li Jun immediately opened a secure channel to Earth. Admiral Kim Day appeared on the screen within minutes, his weathered face grim. Captain Li, we received your initial message. What's the situation? Li Jun played back the recording of the council meeting. He watched Admiral Kim's face grow darker with each passing minute. When the recording ended, the Admiral was quiet for a long time. 40%, Admiral Kim finally said. 10 million people. Yes, sir. They called it a tribute demand. They said it was mandatory for all junior species. And they gave us 24 hours to accept. Yes, sir. They seemed to think there was no possibility we'd refuse. Admiral Kim rubbed his forehead. Captain, I'm calling an emergency session of the Global Defense Council. You and Dr. Park need to be available for immediate consultation. In the meantime, do not return to that council chamber until you receive direct orders. The transmission ended, leaving Li Jun alone with his thoughts. He looked out at the massive council station and wondered how many other species had stood where he stood, facing the same impossible choice. In 22 hours, he would have to return to that chamber and give humanity's answer. The council expected acceptance. They'd been doing this for 50 million years, and no one had ever said no. But as Li Jun stared at the ancient alien structure, he found himself wondering something that no one in the galaxy had wondered for a very long time. What would happen if someone finally did say no? The emergency session began 6 hours after Li Jun's transmission reached Earth. The holographic conference room aboard the Soul's Pride filled with the images of Earth's most important leaders. President Yang Su sat at the head of the virtual table, her engineer's mind already working through the problem. Admiral Kim Day was there, along with General Bei Nari from Strategic Defense Command. But the most important person in the meeting was someone Li Jun had never met before. Dr. Cho Min-ho appeared as a slightly flickering hologram, his elderly face lined with decades of studying alien civilizations. Dr. Cho, President Yang said, you've had 6 hours to research this tribute system. What did you find? Dr. Cho's expression was grim. Nothing good, I'm afraid. I've been digging through every historical record we have access to, both human and alien. The tribute system is real, and it's been operating for exactly as long as the Council claims. Park Hana leaned forward from her position next to Li Jun. Doctor, in your research, did you find any species that successfully refused to pay tribute? That's the problem, Dr. Cho said. I found records of only one species that ever tried to refuse. They were called the Corvani. Their civilization lasted about 2,000 years before they were contacted by the Council. What happened to them? Admiral Kim asked. They're extinct, Dr. Cho said simply. Completely extinct. Their homeworld is a dead rock. Their colonies were stripped bare. There are no living Corvani anywhere in the galaxy. The virtual conference room fell silent. General Nari was the first to speak. How long did they resist? According to the records I found, they held out for 53 years. They had a powerful military, advanced technology, and they fought hard. But the Council has resources that dwarf anything a single species can muster. President Yang rubbed her temples. Dr. Cho, what about species that did pay tribute? How did that work out for them? Dr. Cho activated a holographic display showing star charts and economic data. I was able to get partial records on 12 species that accepted tribute demands. The pattern is always the same. They start by giving 40% of their production. Within 50 years, they're economically dependent on the Council for basic survival. Within 100 years, they're essentially slaves. But they survive, Admiral Kim pointed out. Do they? Dr. Cho asked. The species that pay tribute lose their independence, their culture, their identity. They become worker drones for the Council. Is that really survival? Li Jun had been quiet during most of the discussion, but now he spoke up. Dr. Cho, I need to ask you something. During my research into galactic history, I came across references to something called the cycle. Do you know what that means? Dr. Cho's face grew even more serious. Yes, Captain. The cycle is how the Council maintains control. They identify promising young civilizations and guide their development. They make contact when the species is advanced enough to be useful, but not advanced enough to be a threat. They offer membership in the Council, which seems like an honor. Then comes the tribute demand, Park Hana said, understanding. Exactly. The species either submits and slowly dies, or they resist and die quickly. Either way, they eventually disappear, and the Council moves on to the next promising civilization. It's been happening for 50 million years. President Yang stood up from her virtual chair. So our choices are to become slaves or to be destroyed. Those appear to be the only options the Council offers, Dr. Cho confirmed. General Nari activated her own display, showing Earth's military capabilities. Let's talk about the military option. If we refuse tribute and they attack, what are our chances? Admiral Kim answered before she could continue. None. We have 300 ships in our entire fleet. The Council has been building their forces for 50 million years. They could crush us without breaking a sweat. What about allies? Li Jun asked. The other species paying tribute. Maybe if we all work together, Dr. Cho shook his head. I tried to research that possibility. The tribute system is designed to prevent cooperation. Each species is kept isolated, focused on meeting their own tribute requirements. They don't have the resources or the freedom to help each other. Park Hana had been quiet, but now she spoke up. Dr. Cho, I noticed something while we were in the Council chamber. The other species representatives looked defeated, broken, like they'd given up hope entirely. That's part of the system, Dr. Cho explained. The Council doesn't just take resources. They break spirits. They make sure every species knows that resistance is hopeless, that the Council is too powerful to fight. President Yang sat back down heavily. So what you're telling me is that we have no good options. Submit and die slowly or resist and die quickly. That's what the historical record shows, Dr. Cho said. There was a long pause. Finally, Li Jun asked a question that had been bothering him since the Council meeting. Dr. Cho, you said the Corvani were the only species to resist. What was their response when they received the tribute demand? Dr. Cho consulted his notes. They sent a formal diplomatic response, a document about 300 pages long. They explained why they couldn't pay tribute, offered alternative arrangements, proposed reduced payments over a longer timeline. They tried to negotiate, and the Council's response? They ignored the negotiation attempt completely. Within a year, Council enforcement fleets were attacking Corvani colonies. Admiral Kim leaned forward. What about the species that accepted tribute? How did they respond? Similar diplomatic documents, formal acceptances, requests for implementation timelines, proposals for how to manage the tribute payments, all very proper and diplomatic. Something was nagging at Li Jun's mind. Dr. Cho, do you have copies of any of these responses? A few, yes, why? Can you show me what they look like? Dr. Cho shared several documents. Li Jun read through them quickly. Each one was dozens of pages long, filled with diplomatic language, careful phrasing, and detailed proposals. They all seemed to accept the basic premise that tribute was required and focused on the details of implementation. Park Hana was reading over his shoulder. Captain, these all assume that paying tribute is inevitable. None of them questioned the basic demand. Exactly, Li Jun said. Dr. Cho, in all your research, did you find any record of a species simply refusing? Not negotiating, not proposing alternatives, just saying no? Dr. Cho thought for a moment. No, Captain. Every response I found either accepted the demand or tried to negotiate the terms. I never found a simple refusal. Why not? President Yang asked. Dr. Cho spread his hands. Because it would be suicide. The Council has made it clear that refusal means extinction. No rational leader would choose certain death for their entire species. Li Jun stood up and walked to the edge of the holographic conference room. He stared out at the Council station through the real viewport of his ship. Dr. Cho, you said the Council has been doing this for 50 million years. In all that time, they've never heard a simple no? That's correct. Then they have no experience dealing with a species that won't play their game. Admiral Kim frowned. Captain, what are you thinking? Li Jun turned back to the group. I'm thinking that maybe the Council's greatest strength is also their greatest weakness. They're so used to species either submitting or trying to negotiate that they might not know how to handle something completely different. General Nari shook her head. Captain, that's a very dangerous assumption. Maybe, Li Jun said. But Dr. Cho just told us that our other options are slavery or extinction. If those are really our only choices, then maybe it's time to try something that's never been tried before. President Yang looked around the virtual table. What exactly are you proposing, Captain? Li Jun was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was steady and calm. I'm proposing that when I go back to that council chamber tomorrow, I give them an answer they've never heard before. Not a negotiation, not a plea for mercy, not a formal diplomatic document. What then? Park Hana asked. Li Jun looked directly at President Yang. Just a simple, clear answer that leaves no room for misunderstanding. The conference room was silent as everyone considered what he was suggesting. Finally, President Yang spoke. Captain Li, if you're proposing what I think you're proposing, you're talking about a response that could mean the end of humanity. Yes, ma'am, but it could also mean something else. Something that's never happened in 50 million years of galactic history. And what's that? Li Jun smiled grimly. It could mean the beginning of the end for the Council's tribute system. The debate continued through the night. Li Jun watched the holographic faces of Earth's leaders as they struggled with an impossible decision. President Yang had called in every expert they had, trying to find some alternative that no one had thought of yet. Dr. Xin Wu joined the conference from her office in Seoul. She was the head of the Human Psychological Warfare Division, a small department that most people didn't even know existed. Her specialty was understanding how the mind worked under pressure. Dr. Xin, President Yang said, Captain Li has proposed giving the Council a simple refusal instead of trying to negotiate. From a psychological standpoint, what would that accomplish? Dr. Xin pulled up her own displays, showing complex charts about decision-making and power dynamics. The Council operates on the assumption that all species will act rationally. From their perspective, rational behavior means either submitting to overwhelming force or trying to negotiate better terms. But refusing entirely isn't rational, General Nari pointed out. It's suicide. Exactly, Dr. Xin said. And that's what makes it potentially powerful. The Council has spent 50 million years perfecting their system based on predictable responses. They know how to handle submission. They know how to handle negotiation attempts. They've probably even planned for military resistance. Admiral Kim leaned forward. But they haven't planned for complete refusal. More than that, Dr. Xin continued. A simple refusal doesn't just challenge their system. It challenges their fundamental understanding of how intelligent species behave. If we refuse without trying to negotiate, without offering alternatives, without even acknowledging their authority to make demands, we're essentially telling them that their entire worldview is wrong. Park Hana had been quiet for most of the discussion, but now she spoke up. Dr. Xin, you're talking about this as psychological warfare. But the Council has superior military force. Won't they just use it? They might, Dr. Xin admitted. But here's the thing about psychological warfare. It's not about winning through force. It's about changing how people think. If we give them a response they've never encountered before, it might make them hesitate. It might make them question their own assumptions. President Yang rubbed her eyes. She'd been awake for 18 hours straight. Dr. Xin, let's say Captain Li refuses the tribute demand. What happens next? I can't predict exactly, Dr. Shin said. But I can tell you what won't happen. The Council won't have a standard protocol to follow. They'll have to make decisions on the spot, without the benefit of 50 million years of experience. Dr. Cho had been listening to the psychological analysis with growing interest. Dr. Shin, there's something else to consider. The tribute system isn't just about resources. It's about maintaining control through fear. Every species in the galaxy knows that resistance to the Council is hopeless because no one has ever successfully resisted. Go on, President Yang said. If humanity refuses tribute openly, that knowledge will spread throughout the galaxy. Other species will learn that someone finally said no. Even if we're destroyed for it, the psychological effect on the other tribute-paying species could be enormous. Admiral Kim frowned. You're talking about starting a galactic revolution. I'm talking about planting a seed, Dr. Cho replied. The idea that the Council's power isn't absolute, that their system can be challenged. General Binary had been running calculations on her personal display. The mathematics of this are terrifying. Our entire fleet couldn't hold off a single Council enforcement squadron. If they decide to make an example of us, Earth could be a dead world within weeks. That's true, Li Jun said. But General, what are the mathematics of paying tribute? General Binary consulted her data. 40% of our production, plus 10 million people annually. Our economic models show complete collapse within 15 years. Social breakdown within a decade. We'd be a dead civilization in a generation, just spread out over more time. So either way, humanity as we know it ends, President Yang said quietly. Yes, ma'am, General Binary confirmed. The only difference is how long it takes. The holographic conference room fell silent again. Li Jun could see the weight of the decision pressing down on everyone present. They were being asked to choose between different forms of extinction. Dr. Shin broke the silence. There's one more thing to consider. The psychological profile I've built of Council Prime Vexthari suggests that the being is ancient beyond our comprehension. It's been doing the same thing for millions of years. Beings like that don't adapt well to unexpected situations. What do you mean? Park Hana asked. I mean that if we give Vexithari a response it's never heard before, the being might not know how to react. Ancient creatures of habit don't deal well with sudden changes to their routine. President Yang stood up and walked to the edge of her virtual space. So our options are submit and die slowly, fight conventionally and die quickly, or refuse completely, and maybe create enough confusion to give other species hope. That's an accurate summary, Admiral Kim said. President Yang was quiet for several minutes. Finally, she turned back to the group. Captain Li, if we authorize you to refuse the tribute demand, what exactly would you say? Li Jun had been thinking about this question for hours. Something simple. Something clear. Something that can't be misunderstood or negotiated. Such as, just no, nothing more. No explanations, no justifications, no attempts to soften the blow. Just a simple, direct refusal. Dr. Shin nodded approvingly. From a psychological standpoint, that's perfect. It's the one response they're not prepared for. General Binary looked skeptical. You're betting humanity's survival on the hope that the Council will be so surprised by a simple refusal that they won't know what to do? I'm betting humanity's survival on the idea that dying with dignity is better than dying as slaves, Li Jun replied. And I'm hoping that our refusal might inspire other species to remember what freedom feels like. President Yang looked around the virtual table one more time. Dr. Cho, in all your research, did you find any evidence of what happens to Council members when their system is challenged? Dr. Cho shook his head. No, ma'am. As far as I can tell, their system has never been seriously challenged. We'd be entering completely unknown territory. Admiral Kim, if Captain Li refuses the tribute demand and the Council responds with force, how long can we hold out? Admiral Kim's expression was grim. Hours, maybe days. But we could make sure the galaxy knows what happened to us. Dr. Shin, if we do this, what's the best case scenario? Dr. Shin considered the question carefully. Best case? The Council is so shocked by our refusal that they hesitate long enough for word to spread throughout the galaxy. Other species start questioning the tribute system. The Council's authority begins to erode. Eventually, the entire system collapses. And worst case? Worst case? They destroy us immediately and use our destruction as an example to keep other species in line. President Yang sat down heavily, So we're choosing between certain slow death and possible quick death, with a small chance of starting something bigger. That's correct, Li Jun said. The president looked at each face in the virtual conference room. All right, let's vote. All in favor of authorizing Captain Li to refuse the tribute demand? One by one hands were raised. Not all of them, but enough. The decision was made. Captain Li, President Yang said formally, you are hereby authorized to respond to the Council's tribute demand with a simple refusal. God help us all. Li Jun stood and saluted. Yes, ma'am. I'll make sure our answer is heard clearly. As the conference ended and the holograms faded away, Li Jun found himself alone with Park Hana on the bridge of the Soul's Pride. In a few hours, he would return to the council chamber and do something that no one in galactic history had ever done. He would look at the most powerful beings in the galaxy and simply say, no. Captain, Park Hana said quietly, are you ready for this? Li Jun looked out at the massive council station. I don't think anyone could be ready for this. But I think that's the point. Sometimes you have to do something that no one is ready for. In 6 hours, humanity would either take its first step toward freedom or its last step toward extinction. Either way, they would face it standing up. Li Jun stood outside the council chamber trying to calm his racing heart. In 30 seconds, he would walk through those massive doors and do something that no being in galactic history had ever done. Park Hana stood beside him, her recording equipment ready to document whatever happened next. Captain, she said quietly, once you say it, there's no taking it back. I know, Li Jun replied. That's the point. The doors opened with a sound like distant thunder. The council chamber was exactly as it had been the day before, but somehow it felt different. More threatening. The 12 ancient beings in their massive thrones watched Li Jun walk to the center of the chamber with what might have been amusement. Council Prime Vexthari's crystalline form was a deep blue color, shifting slowly to purple as Li Jun approached. Human representative, you return as commanded. The council awaits your species' formal acceptance of the tribute demand. Li Jun reached the speaking platform and stopped. The chamber was silent except for the quiet humming of ancient machinery. Thousands of years of tradition said that he should now present a formal document, express gratitude for the council's guidance, and accept humanity's place as a tribute-paying species. Instead, he looked directly at Council Prime Vexithari and said one word. No. The word echoed in the vast chamber. For several heartbeats, no one moved. No one spoke. The ancient beings who had ruled the galaxy for 50 million years sat frozen in their thrones, as if their minds couldn't process what they had just heard. Ambassador Quintal was the first to react. The massive serpent's black scales rippled as its coils shifted. Clarification is required. The human appears to have provided an incomplete response. Li Jun didn't elaborate. He didn't explain humanity's reasoning. He didn't offer alternatives or try to negotiate. He simply repeated himself even more clearly this time. No. Now the council erupted. Ancient beings that had outlived stars began making sounds Li Jun had never heard before. Some might have been attempts at communication. Others sounded like machinery breaking down. The translation systems built into the chamber began generating error messages as they tried to process concepts that had no precedent in galactic history. A council member that looked like a giant insect began clicking rapidly. Another being, made of what appeared to be living metal, created sounds like a bell being struck over and over. In the observation galleries, representatives from tribute-paying species leaned forward, straining to understand what was happening. Council Prime Vexithari's crystalline form cycled through colors rapidly. Blue, purple, red, yellow, green, and back to blue. When it finally spoke, its voice carried harmonics that Li Jun had never heard before. The human demonstrates dangerous ignorance of galactic law. Perhaps clarification of consequences is required. Li Jun remained calm. I understand the consequences perfectly. Our answer remains the same. Ambassador Quintal's massive form uncoiled slightly, bringing his enormous head closer to the speaking platform. No species in recorded history has refused a tribute demand. The concept is meaningless. Compliance is mandatory. No, Li Jun said for the third time. The single word seemed to hit the council like a physical blow. Several of the ancient beings began communicating with each other in languages so old that the translation systems couldn't process them. Li Jun caught fragments of what might have been panic, confusion, and something that sounded almost like fear. One of the council members, a being that looked like a floating collection of geometric shapes, suddenly rose from its throne. The human speaks in possibilities. All species comply with council directives. This is the natural order. Not anymore, Li Jun said. Council Prime Vexthari's crystalline form settled on a deep red color and stayed there. The human will reconsider. The alternative to compliance is extinction. We've considered that, Li Jun replied. Our answer doesn't change. For the first time in 50 million years, the Galactic Council faced a situation they had no precedent for. Li Jun could see the confusion spreading through the chamber. These beings had built their entire civilization on the assumption that all species would eventually submit to overwhelming force. The idea that someone might simply refuse to play their game was so alien that their ancient minds struggled to process it. Ambassador Quintal tried a different approach. Perhaps the human misunderstands the tribute system. It is not negotiable. It is not optional. It is the foundation of galactic order. I understand perfectly, Li Jun said. You want 40% of everything humanity produces plus 10 million of our people. Our answer is no. But that is impossible, another council member said. This one looked like a tree made of crystal and metal. Refusal leads to extinction. No rational species chooses extinction. Li Jun smiled grimly. Maybe we're not rational by your standards. In the observation gallery, something unprecedented was happening. Representatives from tribute-paying species were talking to each other. Li Jun could see them pointing at him, their alien faces showing expressions he couldn't read but somehow understood. Word was spreading that someone had finally said no to the council. Council Prime Vexthari rose from its throne. The massive crystalline being had never stood during a tribute ceremony before. Its form towered over the chamber, casting strange shadows as light passed through its crystal structure. The human will withdraw its impossible statement. The tribute demand stands. Compliance is required within 72 hours, or council enforcement fleets will demonstrate the consequences of defiance. Li Jun felt a cold calm settle over him. This was the moment when everything would change one way or another. Prime Vexithari, I want to make sure you understand our position clearly. Humanity rejects your tribute demand completely. We will not pay tribute. We will not negotiate tribute. We will not acknowledge your authority to demand tribute from a free species. The chamber erupted again, but this time the sounds were different. Angrier, more desperate. These beings had spent millions of years believing that their system was perfect, unbreakable, natural. Li Jun's simple refusal was threatening the foundation of their entire worldview. You speak madness, Ambassador Quintal hissed. The tribute system has maintained galactic peace for 50 million years. Your species threatens the stability of the galaxy itself. No, Li Jun said. We're threatening your control over the galaxy. That's not the same thing. Council Prime Vexthari's crystalline form began pulsing with angry red light. The human will reconsider immediately. The alternative is the complete destruction of your species. Li Jun looked around the chamber one more time. In the observation galleries, representatives from dozens of species were watching with an intensity he'd never seen before. For the first time in their lives, they were seeing someone stand up to the council. Prime Vexithari, Li Jun said clearly, you can threaten us, you can attack us, you can even destroy us, but you cannot make us submit. Humanity's answer to your tribute demand is no. It will always be no. The chamber fell silent. The ancient beings who ruled the galaxy stared at the small human who had just shattered 50 million years of precedent with a single word. In that silence, Li Jun could almost hear the sound of certainties cracking, of unquestioned assumptions beginning to crumble. Finally, Council Prime Vexthari spoke. Its voice was different now, carrying undertones of something that might have been uncertainty. The human has 72 hours to retract this impossible statement and formally submit to the tribute demand. This audience is concluded. As Li Jun walked out of the chamber, he could hear the council members beginning to argue among themselves in languages that predated human civilization. Behind him in the observation galleries, representatives from tributary species were talking more loudly than they had in generations. The word no was spreading through the galaxy, and nothing would ever be the same. Captain Oyuna sat in the command chair of the stealth ship Silent Observer, hidden in the sensor shadow of a dead moon, 3 light-years from the council station. Her ship was one of humanity's most advanced vessels, designed for reconnaissance deep in enemy territory. Right now, her mission was to monitor galactic communications and report back to Earth about the reaction to Li Jun's unprecedented refusal. What she was seeing made her question the reliability of her equipment, Lieutenant. Ryu, she said to her communications officer, run another diagnostic on the listening array. These readings can't be correct. Lieutenant Ryuhei checked his instruments for the third time in an hour. Captain, the equipment is functioning perfectly. We're detecting massive spikes in encrypted communications between tribute-paying species, and they're not using council channels. Oyuna frowned. In 30 years of monitoring galactic communications, she'd never seen the tributary species communicate directly with each other. The council's system was designed to keep them isolated, focused only on meeting their tribute requirements. What kind of communications? She asked. That's the strange part, Captain. They're using old encryption methods, ones that predate their contact with the Council. It's like they're deliberately trying to avoid Council monitoring. On the main screen, streams of data showed communication patterns across the galaxy. Dots of light connected distant worlds as species that hadn't spoken to each other in centuries suddenly began transmitting coded messages. Captain, said Dr. Lim Kang, the ship's xenopsychologist, I think I understand what we're seeing. These species are talking to each other for the first time in generations. Captain Lee's refusal has broken some kind of psychological barrier. Oyuna pulled up the tactical display. Dr. Lim, explain. The Council's power isn't just military. It's psychological. They've convinced every species in the galaxy that resistance is impossible, that they're alone, that the Council's authority is absolute. But Captain Lee just proved that someone can say no and live to tell about it. He hasn't lived through it yet, Oyuna pointed out. The Council gave him 72 hours to retract his statement. But he survived the moment, Dr. Lim insisted. For 50 million years, every species has believed that simply refusing a tribute demand would result in immediate destruction. Captain Lee stood in that chamber, said no, and walked out alive. That simple fact is spreading across the galaxy. Lieutenant Ryu looked up from his console. Captain, I'm getting a priority transmission from Earth. It's Admiral Kim. Admiral Kim's face appeared on the screen, but the transmission was weak and intermittent. Captain O, what's your status? Admiral, we're monitoring massive changes in galactic communication patterns. The tributary species are talking to each other using encrypted channels. We're seeing the same thing from our monitoring stations. Captain, I need you to attempt contact with some of these species. We need to know what they're thinking. Oyuna felt a chill run down her spine. Sir, that would expose our position. If the Council detects us, Captain, in 67 hours, Captain Lee is going to have to face the Council again. If we're going to survive what's coming, we need allies. This might be our only chance to find them. The transmission ended, leaving Oyuna to consider an almost impossible mission. Contact species that had been under Council control for thousands of years, convince them to risk everything on the hope that humanity's refusal might succeed, and do it all without alerting the Council to their presence. Dr. Lim, she said finally, if you were a species that had been paying tribute for 1,000 years, and you suddenly heard that someone had refused, what would you be thinking? Dr. Lim considered the question carefully. I'd be thinking about whether it was possible that the Council wasn't as powerful as they claimed. I'd be wondering if other species felt the same way I did. And I'd be scared to hope because hope is dangerous when you've been broken for so long. Lieutenant Ryu, can you identify which species are communicating most actively? Ryu consulted his displays. Yes, Captain. There's a cluster of 5 species in the Andorian sector that seem to be coordinating their communications, and there's another group near the Galactic Rim that's been transmitting constantly since news of Captain Lee's refusal spread. Pick the closest group and establish contact. Use the old diplomatic frequencies, the ones that predate Council oversight. It took 6 hours to establish a secure communication link with a species called the Vellani. They were one of the older tributary species, having paid tribute to the Council for over 3,000 years. Their representative appeared on the screen as a tall, thin being with large eyes and pale blue skin. Human vessel, the Vellani said in accented but clear Standard Galactic. We receive your transmission. We must know, is it true that your species has refused tribute? It's true, Oyuna confirmed. Captain Li Jun told the Council that humanity would not pay tribute. The Vellani's large eyes seemed to grow even larger. And he was not destroyed immediately? He was given 72 hours to reconsider. Impossible, the Vailani whispered. In our experience, any challenge to council authority results in immediate punishment. Dr. Lim leaned into the transmission range. How long has your species been paying tribute? 3,217 years, the Vailani replied automatically. We have never missed a payment. We have never questioned a demand. We have been compliant. What if you didn't have to be? Oyuna asked. The Vailani was quiet for a long moment. Do not speak such things. The council monitors all communications. Not these channels, Lieutenant Ryu interjected. We're using pre-council encryption. They can't break it without dedicating significant resources, and right now they're focused on the human problem. You speak of hope, the Vailani said. But hope is dangerous. The council has maintained order for 50 million years. They are too powerful to resist. Maybe, Dr. Lim said. But what if they're not? What if their power comes from everyone believing they're too powerful to resist? The transmission was quiet for several minutes. Finally, the Vailani spoke again. There are others listening to this conversation. Species from across our sector. We have been discussing the human action. What are you discussing? Oyuna asked. Whether it is possible that we have been wrong about the council. Whether their power is as absolute as we have believed. Whether the human example might inspire changes. Oyuna felt her pulse quicken. What kind of changes? Hypothetical changes, the Vailani said quickly. We speak only of hypotheticals, but Dr. Lim understood. You're talking about resistance. We speak of nothing. We are loyal council subjects who pay tribute faithfully. Despite the denial, Oyuna could hear something new in the Vailani's voice, something that hadn't been there at the beginning of the conversation. It sounded almost like hope. Over the next 48 hours, the silent observer made contact with 17 different species. The conversations were similar, carefully worded discussions about hypothetical scenarios, denials of any rebellious intent, but underlying it all was a growing sense that something fundamental had changed in the galaxy. Word of humanity's refusal was spreading faster than the council could contain it. Species that hadn't communicated directly in centuries were sharing encrypted messages. Old resistance movements that had been dormant for millennia were beginning to stir. As the 72-hour deadline approached, Captain Oyuna received a final transmission from Earth. This time it was from President Yang herself. Captain O, your reports have been enlightening. It appears that Captain Lee's refusal has had consequences none of us anticipated. Yes, ma'am. The tributary species are beginning to question the Council's authority for the first time in generations. Captain, I want you to transmit a message on all frequencies, both secure and open channels. Make sure every species in the galaxy hears it. What's the message, ma'am? President Yang's expression was grim but determined. Tell them that in 18 hours, Captain Lee Jun will return to the council chamber. Tell them that humanity's answer to the tribute demand remains unchanged. And tell them that any species that wishes to join us in refusing tribute will have Earth's full support. Oyuna felt her breath catch. Ma'am, that's a declaration of galactic revolution. No, Captain. That's a declaration that the age of tribute is over. As the transmission ended, Oyuna began broadcasting humanity's message across the galaxy. In systems where species had paid tribute for thousands of years, beings gathered around their communication devices to hear the impossible words. Humanity was not backing down. The refusal would stand, and for the first time in 50 million years, other species were beginning to believe that they might not have to stand alone. The galaxy held its breath as Captain Lee Jun prepared to return to the council chamber and speak the word. That was changing everything. No,